Well, Indiana fans, don't look now. Don't look now. You've got 16 days until Indiana's season opener. Where did the offseason go? The summer zoomed on by. Students are moving into campus. And in a little over 2 weeks, your Indiana football Hoosiers will be taking on the Illinois Fighting Illini at Memorial Stadium, a Friday night primetime home opener. 2 weeks of training camp are in the books, and we're going to bring to you the biggest storylines that have risen to the surface since the start of training camp, and so much more here on episode 259 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Wednesday, August 17th, 2022. I am your host, Nathan Krishnan. Along with me is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, how are you doing? And are you getting that football appetite here? September almost here.
Yeah, I'm ready for football to start. I'm itching for Indiana sports to be back. I'm too focused on getting ready for fantasy football leagues. Look, I need football back in my life. Okay, so I'm all prepared. I'm sure everybody listening to the podcast, including all the people at HQ and beyond involved with the Indiana fan base, are excited, optimistic, excited. Yes.
Optimism is the word, though. I think optimism is shared by the 100 or so players on the football roster,
I'd hope so.
all the members of the coaching staff. Look, folks, let's not sugarcoat things. If Indiana doesn't believe in Indiana, why would anyone else? And so Tom Allen is starting there, and it of course begins with the quarterback decision. And Allen, along with offensive coordinator Walt Bell and defensive coordinator Chad Wilt, number of players as well. They've shared their thoughts over the course of the last 2 weeks in press conference with the media that we've sit in on over at Indiana HQ. Allen made it clear his quarterback decision will not be publicly revealed until Friday, September 2nd, when Indiana takes on Illinois. Will it be Connor Bazelak, who's transferring in from Missouri? Will it be Jack Tuttle, who has the Indiana Hoosier experience? Allen will not publicly show his hand until the Hoosiers take on the Fighting Illini. Now, Indiana has an intra-squad scrimmage later this week, and Allen did say he would like to have his decision privately taken care of after that scrimmage wraps up. Matt, how much of a competitive advantage is it for IU not to announce their starting QB until Friday night on opening night against Illinois?
Slight competitive advantage, minuscule, because here's the thing. People are like, oh, well, it gives IU a chance to kind of be like, well, is this our starting quarterback or not? And so then teams have to focus on studying for two quarterbacks. I will tell you this, that they've had an infinite amount of time to study for IU. They knew who we were playing. They've studied for both quarterbacks, for Tuttle and for Baselix. So whoever runs out there on Friday night against Illinois in the IU jersey, starting under center for the Hoosiers, will have been studied by Illinois. So it's only a slight bit of a thing, and they will actually probably have two defensive plans based off the quarterbacks. Even though Baselak and Tuttle have very similar play styles, they'll probably have two packages for both of them, based off the film they saw from Baselak at Mizzou and based off of previous film seen of Tuttle playing at IU. The good news is for IU, though, is that hopefully over the summer they have incorporated some new packages for these quarterbacks in the offensive system, so to keep Illinois on their toes, and Illinois will do the same thing. So that's the magic of the first game. Now, we didn't get to see that last year because we had an inept offensive coordinator who ran the same packages against Iowa for the same person in week one, which means Iowa was already very well prepared and we looked like trash. So, hopefully, this year against a lesser opponent in Illinois than Iowa, we'll have a much better time. Thank you.
How crazy is it that Indiana has not played Illinois since 2017? I mean that to me
I was at the last game.
isn't that crazy? I mean that one was in Champaign. Indiana won that one 24-14.
That was
Indiana's
the worst day of my life. It was so cold in Champaign that
oh
day. It was unbelievably cold. And they had us sit outside in the stadium. Thank you, Illinois band, from 5 a.m. to like noon when it started. And there was no heating. So I was just cold the entire time. So thank you. Thank you, Illinois.
oh,
I hate them
sounds
for that.
sounds really difficult. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Matt.
It's okay. It was a it's okay.
Indiana hasn't hosted Illinois since 2013.
Such a long
And
time.
so maybe that's the payback, right? Maybe weather permitting, right? Indiana freezes out the Illini a little bit,
True.
and in the Thursday night or the Friday morning before that first game. Look, I'm purely speculating here, just one man's opinion on August 17th. I still would be surprised if Jack Tuttle would get the first shot. I would not be surprised if Jack Tuttle found his way into the game at some point, but I would be surprised if Jack Tuttle got the first snaps.
I
I
agree
would
with you.
I would guess at this point it's Bazelak. Bazelak has said all the right things publicly as far as his attitude and his approach to a new team. He said the transition's been smooth. He's enjoyed being around his teammates and the change of scenery compared to the University of Missouri. But bottom line, the decision will not be revealed until September 2nd. I think, it may not be a competitive advantage necessarily, but if nothing else, it is not a matter of showing your hand. And the most important thing is that IU privately knows who QB1 is. That's
Mhm.
the most important thing. They can prepare that way going into a really big season opener against the Illini. Staying along the offensive side of the football, there was a true freshman who got more attention than maybe a casual Indiana football fan would have expected over the last 2 weeks. This is not someone that you looked at as far as Indiana's 2022 incoming recruiting class. This is not someone you would have said, wow, I'm expecting this player to have a big breakout freshman season. But one player that has regularly come up, starting with Tom Allen, is freshman athlete Jaylin Lucas, who is a rocket of a running back slash wide receiver, someone who comes in and is a 5'985" player from Louisiana. He's listed on the depth chart as a running back, but the reviews have been glowing about Lucas. Tom Allen has said, I do not see this as a developmental year for Lucas. If you go and pull his highlight videos, of course, those pull out just the best plays from Jalen Lucas' high school career, but you could really see that speed in short spaces and short areas, that elusiveness, that shiftiness that could really help an offense. Matt, Indiana's offense needs all the help it can get. And usually it's size and skill that have been the hallmarks of Indiana's receivers. The last real speedster I remember doing big things was Shane Wynn. I'm looking forward to seeing Jalen Lucas make a splash, perhaps as early as opening night.
Yeah, the guys that can do work in small spaces are going to be so valuable for this football team just because of our lack of faith, I would say, in the offensive line, right? So the faster you can get into your route, the faster you can get to a break, the faster you can create separation on your route. That's going to save Connor Bazelak's life, basically. And I will go out on a limb and also say that he will be starting. Again, we were just talking about it for the podcast. He has 3 years left, by the way, for a transfer quarterback. So that's crazy. Which is more time than Tuttle, I believe, has left at IU. If I'm just like thinking off the top of my head. So I don't know what Jack Tuttle's decision making is going to be like. going in the future, seeing that he's going to probably be the odd man out. But yeah, Jaylin Lucas has, I mean, all the coaches have talked about him. Again, with DJ Matthews coming back, we have a 1-2 punch with him and DJ Matthews, kind of those quick guys that can create separation. But if I'm an offensive play caller, Jaylin Lucas is valuable for two reasons, right? You said he was an athlete, right?
Mhm.
He can play running back and play wide receiver. That means you can line up with a two running back set, right? You can have two backs in the backfield. He can go and kind of run a route from basically under center or just off
Yeah.
of center, right? In the formation. He can in motion move to a slot position. He can move out wide, right? There's a lot you can do, a lot you can throw at a defense, just with movement, that Jaylin Lucas offers you, which makes your offense more multidimensional, which is something that Indiana severely lacked last year. So, I believe in this Lucas hype. Now, is he going to be wide receiver number one? No. No. Like we got to look at other people that are returning that have more experience than him, like DJ Matthews. Javon Swinton is one guy that's gone really under the radar. Again, he's had some really good moments last couple of years. I remember him having a couple of really good catches in the Penn State game that we won.
It's absolutely
He's
correct.
been around for a while, and is somebody that I am hoping can kind of break through and kind of break out of the pack of the Big Ten wide receivers. But that wide receiver room is getting bigger, Nathan, right? With the addition of Omar Cooper, who's a freshman, and then one of our
Does you think
quarterbacks,
Anderson Kobe transferring in from
Anderson
Tennessee,
Kobe.
Emery Simmons in from North Carolina, Cam Camper in from junior
Yeah,
college, and of course Donovan McCully
Donovan
transitioning
McCullough.
over. And so
Dude,
it's really fascinating because when I think of the best receivers at Indiana, guys like Cody Latimer and Tandon Doss and Simi Cobbs and Nick Westbrook over the last few years, now Nick Westbrook Akina, you really see sort of a bigger size profile, really significant red zone threats. And I'm sure I'm missing one or two receivers there, but when I look at Jaylin Lucas, I see someone who may be used in this offense similar to David Ellis over the last few years. Now, David Ellis has moved on, but I look at Jaylin Lucas and I say, okay, he's a little shorter, and by little I mean a lot. Ellis is 6'1". Lucas 5 feet 9 inches according to the Indiana football roster.
yeah.
But you see Jaylin Lucas, and you see Sean Shivers, and you see DJ Matthews, and now all of a sudden you say, okay, maybe for the first time in a while, Indiana is going to be looking to win games with speed. And it makes sense. Tom Allen, with his Florida recruiting skill, you see these things kind of aligning. And I'm really fascinated to see how this looks. You talked about the hesitation with Indiana's offensive line coming up this year. How do you help them out? Throw those screen passes, throw those zebra routes out of the backfield, throw those simple plays where the running backs or the receivers can grab the ball, make a man miss, and get 20 yards. That, I think, is exactly the blueprint you can expect to see out of Indiana. But Jaylin Lucas and the running back I mentioned earlier, Sean Shivers, were both identified as the fastest players on the team by Tom Allen. Lucas had Florida State offer, Louisville offer coming out of high school. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Jaylin Lucas can provide this team, especially
I
with the question marks you have at wide receiver and offensive line.
True. I'm excited that the IU offense is going down this route of speed.
It's
Uh,
different. I'm looking forward to it.
it's different, but it's also it kind of feels familiar, right? Like that was what we had the most success with offensively under our previous under Kevin Wilson, right? Under our previous head coach, right? When we had speedsters, we
Like
had the Simi
Shane
Cobbs,
Wynn, and Tevin
Shane
Coleman, right?
Wynn,
Tevin
Tevin
Coleman was
Coleman.
the legendary speedster.
Exactly. Tevin Coleman is the speedster, right? And he was on the high, like IU is never going to be a program, at least in the short term, right? That's going to attract the top level ultra athletes that can do everything on the field. So you kind of have to opt into either you want the big guys, you want the big wide receivers that can kind of like moss somebody, right? Maybe on a good day. or you want the short guys that can outspeed everybody. And we've seen teams, smaller teams like the Boise States of the world and other teams go with speed.
UCFs, yeah.
UCFs go with speed, and it works well. And you can upset people. And on a good year, you could possibly be in contention for a Rose Bowl, right? And on a bad year, you're still possibly 6-6 because
Mhm.
speed kills, and it's hard to train speed. So I'm really excited that IU's going this direction because we've moved on from the big wide receivers. I love Nick Westbrook Ekine, right? But
Right.
he's was kind of the problem because when we're playing offense and our receivers are slow and our offensive line is outmatched by defensive line and their routes take forever to create
It works when you
space.
have the Dan Feeneys and the Jason Spriggs in front of you
Exactly.
to
Exactly.
hold the pocket for a while. It's different, it seems, coming up here in 22.
It didn't even work then either because they were outmatched by much better defensive lines in the Ohio States and Michigans, right? They're better athletes. So you need to have some sort of advantage, and speed can create that. And I'm very excited to see what this offense can do under new leadership this year.
Now, let's make it clear, Indiana's not going to run out a full skill set, a full complement of 5'9" guys on the field, okay?
No.
You've got an interesting tight end room coming up led by AJ Varner this year. We've talked about some of the size up front as far as Indiana is concerned. On the receiving core, you have Javon Swinton, as we've talked about. We have Emery Simmons. We have Cam Camper. But what's interesting, as we touched on a little moment ago, is that the quarterback for Indiana last year, not Michael Penix, not Jack Tuttle, but Donovan McCully, has made a position switch to wide receiver, and it has really captured the interest of the coaches and the players on the football team. A lot of positive reviews as far as McCully's position switch is concerned. Very little hesitation from the team as far as making this decision. According to
Mm-hmm.
Tom Allen, they came to it very quickly. Donovan McCully was really on board from the start. He said to the media he wants to be one of the best to ever do it. Whatever path that takes, whatever path is necessary, McCully is going to follow. Remember, one of the highest rated incoming freshmen when he joined Indiana in 2021. And to be perfectly clear, McCully is someone who will be noticeable on the football field. Made a jersey number switch from 0 to 1. And number 1 on the offense is going to be 6'5", 210 pounds out wide. Matt, I'll be honest with you. There's a path here for McCully to get starting wide receiver reps at some point this season. But the good news for him is that, and for Indiana, is that IU will be favored in their first 3 games. McCully will have a chance to transition smoothly to his new wide receiver position.
Yeah. I remember, or I've seen quarterbacks do really well switching to wide receiver. There's a direct translation there. Again, quarterbacks, they kind of know how everything works, but especially they have a special relationship with receivers because they understand where the receiver wants to get open, how his route works, where kind of like the timing is based off of how the team is rushing you, and there's a level, an extra level of knowledge, an extra like salt and pepper, an extra seasoning on a wide receiver that was a previous quarterback. There's a lot of really good wide receivers in the NFL that were previous quarterbacks. I think right off the top of my head, Julian Edelman is
yeah.
very famous for doing that. There's a bunch of
Yeah, you
guys
think
that
about
do
Randall
that.
Cobb, who did it for Green Bay. How about Braxton Miller, who used to be quarterback at Ohio State and then he moved on? Terrell Pryor. You see someone
Yeah.
with maybe a similar body type to Donovan McCully. Not the craziest thing in the world.
No, no, it's not the craziest thing in the world to do. I think it's kind of interesting how they moved on from him being a quarterback after 1 year. I feel like that was like maybe a bit rushed, but if the conversations were short and everybody agreed on it. I guess I can't have too much of a problem with it. I know I just went on a whole rant about speed guys, but
Yeah.
he's
Well, you
not
got to
he's
have that
not
mix.
he's not slow either. That's the thing. He's not a slow guy. He's very athletic for his size at 6'5". So that's gonna be a really nice compliment. Now, how's his hands? How his route running is probably going to be a little bit shaky to start. He's probably going to overthink things, right? But if he can get that under wraps, there he's going to blossom very quickly into a very good wide receiver if he's got the hands for it. Because it's not the NFL. Not every wide receiver comes in with the ability to catch the ball. So
How unfortunate. Yeah.
So under pressure, how is his ability to get a hold of the pigskin? We shall see.
Now, I want to make sure, I wasn't sure how to deliver this, but I want to make sure Indiana fans don't get upset. Obviously, the best quarterback to wide receiver transition of all time
Yes.
was thanks to Antoine Randall, right? Who was a
Yes.
superstar in Indiana. Of course, made a number of key plays at a wide receiver position, a long career as a receiver in the NFL. I know our good friend Noah was probably throwing stuff at the wall there. Hopefully, no property was damaged. By the way,
Sorry, Jenna, if anything was broken.
birthday boy Antoine Randall while we're at it as here on August 17th. So
Is
that's
it really his
fascinating
birthday?
too. Yeah, how about that?
Oh wow, that's
Um,
crazy.
I like your point as far as that quarterback thought process helping McCully as a wide receiver. It was a sentiment shared by Indiana wide receiver coach Adam Henry when Henry spoke to the media a few days ago. And he mentioned when Henry mentioned when he was at LSU, players like Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, they played multiple positions there. So there's a blueprint. Indiana's not deciding these things blindly. And of course, it helps when the player is as committed to it as McCully is, as he quoted to saying he's always wanted to play wide receiver again. It's what he's always seen himself as. With that said, that's the offensive side of the ball. Plenty to think about. Of course, Indiana is likely not going to be one of the most electrifying offenses in the country this year. However, in week one, they're favored to win. They're projected to score in the 20s. And the good news is those first three games, Illinois,
Winnable.
Idaho, Western Kentucky, you can win. You're favored to win, and it gives you a little leash to experiment with some things. You don't have to worry about going down 3 possessions in the first half at Kinnick Stadium in a top 25 game to open the season. It's a little bit easier of a transition this year. Of course, bottom line, Indiana is going to have to do everything in their power to win that season opener against the Illini in week one. Right now, the Hoosiers about a 5-point favorite. We're going to get into some defensive questions and storylines surrounding this team since the beginning of fall camp. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU Sports. And we're going to stick with the football theme. What an impressive weekend it was for a number of Hoosiers in the preseason across the NFL in week one. Headlined by Marcelino McCrary Ball, who took a Jordan Love pass that was deflected. And he not only intercepted it, but McCrary Ball took it about 50 yards into Green Bay territory. It was a wonderful play by Marcelino McCrary Ball, who had he avoided injury at Indiana, and we're talking about 2 serious injuries, he would have been a day 1 or day 2 draft pick in the NFL. Unfortunately, though, 2 serious injuries during his time as a Hoosier. However, he's making splash plays now in the Bay Area. All indications are that McCrary Ball is doing what he has to do as an undrafted free agent to make the San Francisco 49ers roster. So with another good game coming up this weekend, you better believe McCrary Ball will help his chances. He had a 15-minute session with the media on either Sunday or Monday after the 49ers won. You can find the video on YouTube. McCrary Ball really dove into his personal story. He was working at Home Depot when he found out that the 49ers wanted to bring him in. It was really fascinating to hear about McCrary Ball's story, the roller coaster ride that his life has been on really since coming on campus as an Indiana Hoosier. He mentioned to the media that everyone, this is essentially a quote, that everyone at IU, including himself, expected a monster 2020 season out of Marcelino McCreary Ball. Remember, 2020 season where Indiana went 6-2. McCreary Ball hurt himself during camp in the build-up to that season, tore his ACL. McCreary Ball mentioned he expected to have a massive season that 2020 year, did not have the chance. And of course, last year for IU football, things went south pretty quickly. It's great to see McCreary Ball getting his chance here with San Francisco. On the very next play after McCreary Ball picked off Jordan Love, Nate Sudfeld threw a deep ball touchdown. It was great to see the experienced Hoosier quarterback getting some run there with San Francisco. We are also seeing Peyton Hendershot getting a lot of love here with the Dallas Cowboys. Initially joined the team as sort of a fourth tight end on the practice squad, or I should say on the 90-man camp roster, wasn't expected to make the 53. Yet all Hendershot's done is win his one-on-one reps in practice, get open down the field, make some catches against the Denver Broncos in week 1 of the preseason. And in fact, one of his biggest plays didn't even count because it was called back because of a penalty. Michael Gelkin, who's a beat writer for the Cowboys, has tweeted out a number of impressive comments as far as Hendershot's concerned. We retweeted one of those over at Indiana HQ as Peyton Hendershot tries to stake his claim on the Dallas Cowboys roster. And frankly, if he doesn't make the Cowboys because they're pretty loaded at tight end, I fully anticipate Hendershot will grab a spot with another team across the NFL here who is looking for someone in the tight end position. So way to go, Hoosiers and the pros as far as the NFL is concerned. If you would like to subscribe to our podcast for free, especially if you just moved into Bloomington for your upcoming year at school, all you have to do is search for The Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at The Hoosier Sound. This part is important, though. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. That kind of support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. Matt, on the defensive side of the ball, fewer questions, fewer areas of concern. With that said, there's a higher standard, I would say, going into the season on the defensive side of the ball. Matt, one of the things that was a recurring theme communicated by the coaches over the last couple of weeks is really how noticeable the depth has been on the defensive side of the ball. You think about the defensive line where Indiana comes out with James Head Jr., who has years of experience under his belt. You have J.H. Tevis, who's transferring in from Cal after all Pac-12 honors. DeMarcus Elliott, who's been here for a while. Alfred Bryant is going to play the bolt position, it looks like, but he's someone who has really stood out. Bo Robbins, Big CO, the nose tackle up front. Miles Jackson coming in from UCLA. Matt, whether it's a defensive line or the secondary, Indiana's depth is noticeable. I don't think this is just a filler comment made by the coaching staff trying to stall as they're talking to the media. I think this is legitimate depth on Indiana's defense, and I expect it to make a difference as early as week 1.
I think that's the biggest difference maker on this team. I believe the defensive depth, especially up front, like you just mentioned, you just listed all the names, right? They're going to see time this year. If it's as good as the coaches say it is, right? And on paper, it looks good. If it works out together and that they develop chemistry and they begin to get into a rhythm throughout the year, that to me could be ultimately the reason why Indiana makes a bowl game this year. And has a successful season. Do I think that's going to happen? Yeah, that. Do I think we're going to make a bowl game? I can totally see this defensive unit gelling and then the offense totally selling them out. But if the team does succeed and does well, it's because of this. It's because of the defensive depth we have up front, and not only just in the secondary, but up front. And we're going to talk about some of the more exciting newcomers to the defense here in a second. But I don't think there's anybody more exciting and more under the radar on this team than J.H. Tevis. I mean, literally, he was an all Pac-12 mention on a Cal team that was not great last year.
Irrelevant. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was like obvious enough of a difference maker on that team to get all Pac-12 honors. That's pretty important. Yes, the Pac-12 isn't as good as the Big Ten. I don't care if you're an all conference mention. That's a huge deal, regardless of whatever conference you're in. You could be all conference in the Sun Belt. I don't care. That's something to be proud of and something to really look forward to as a fan to see him play in IU uniform. So count me as in the JH Trevis fan club.
I love that. If you ask me, I'm in the big CO fan club and the DeMarcus Elliott fan club. I think those are two guys that I've really enjoyed watching here, especially in person. As whenever I'm able to catch an IU game covering the Hoosiers, I'm looking forward to seeing them all mesh together. And here's the thing, I don't mean to, stress any of you out listening to our podcast, but Indiana is going to be facing an Illinois team in week 1 that is going to run the ball and run the ball and run the ball some more. Last year, they did it to a tune of over 300 yards against Penn State. It's Brett Bielema. It's Chase Brown, who's their starting running back. Many folks believe Chase Brown is the best player on Illinois. And the good news is Indiana will get a quick glimpse of the Illini in week 0. Literally less than 2 weeks' time when Illinois plays an actual game against Wyoming. That will be hosted by the Illini. So I will have one additional game of data to look at as far as the 2022 season is concerned. But that defensive line is going to very possibly either win or lose the game for Indiana in week 1. So having a number of key players there up front is going to make a big difference. Allen also did go on to talk about the number of linebackers, especially with so many new faces, players like Bradley Jennings coming in from Miami, Florida, Jared Casey coming in from Kentucky, Aaron Casey, who is primed for a big year at the linebacker spot this upcoming season. The depth there at linebacker maybe not as noticeable as it is up front or in the secondary, but it's there. And you can see some valuable pieces in that linebacking core, including incoming freshman Dasan McCullough. And McCullough is the player that everyone's looking forward to watching. And the question really becomes how much. McCullough, a 6'5" true freshman who is a top 100 recruit nationally, did not waver from his commitment when Father Dasan McCullough took the running back coach job at Notre Dame. McCullough, who will wear number 0 on the defensive side of the ball, is currently listed as a linebacker on the Indiana depth chart. But listening to Chad Wilt speak to the media on Tuesday, the comment that Wilt made that I thought really stood out was, we're working on ways to get him on the field. And whether that means as a safety or as a linebacker or as a defensive end, Matt, the bottom line is Indiana has to find that perfect mix of quantity and quality out of Dasan McCullough this first year.
Yes. And look, he's a high level recruit, right? Not a lot of these guys have ever come to Indiana. In fact, he's the highest rated recruit ever to commit to Indiana. They are an enigma when it comes to football, because usually football, these guys by now have gone through high school football, they've gone through sevens camps, they've gone through all. They know what their skill set is, right? They understand what their ceiling is. They understand what kind of player they're going to possibly be in the future. So when you get a 3-star recruit coming in, it's about fit, right? And then you develop their skills to be slightly better than before, and then boom, they break out and they become possibly an NFL draft pick. Top level recruits like this, they're like Play-Doh. They can be molded. They can do everything, right? And so that's the best thing about Dasan McCullough, and the best thing about him being in Tom Allen's defense, because Tom Allen's defense allows a guy like him to play every position possible. He can play linebacker, he can play husky, he can play safety, he can play, heck, if he wanted to play corner, he could play corner, right? He
Give him some offensive time too while you're at it, maybe.
right.
But
He can slot in a defensive end if he wanted to, right? He's a guy that can just do it all. And so when they say, "Oh, we'll find a way to work him into the offense or the defense," sorry, I'm like, "Well, no, yeah, of course you are." One, he's just that crazy of an athlete, but two, he can fill in anywhere. So even if he's not starting, he can come in and play, and on three different snaps, he can play three different positions, right? And so that's really good for depth, obviously, but and it's really good for him as well because he's going to gain experience at all these spots and he'll learn which position he's better at. So I see this as much more of a development year for Dasan.
Mhm.
Now it'd be interesting to see what he does after the season ends because one, his brother kind of retired, and two, his dad left and went to Notre Dame. How does that all work out for IU in the future? Hopefully he gets some NIL incentives to stay. But I can really see him possibly not starting or fighting for that Husky position because I really think at the end of the day, that's the position that he's probably going to play the most. If he is to stay at IU, because it's a position that allows you to be a difference maker. But I can see
He's
him just being a really good rotational piece this year that can be a possible playmaker at multiple positions.
Well, and this is a similar trend we just talked about on the offensive side of the ball, right? You want some speed and you want some athleticism from your outside linebackers, from your corners, from your safeties, and that's what Indiana is going to have this upcoming season. I'm really looking forward to seeing this pass rush of James Head Jr. and Bo Robbins and Alfred Bryant and Miles Jackson and Dasan McCullough and Indiana is going to bring their fair share of blitzes from the inside linebacker position from what we saw at Micah McFadden, and you can expect Aaron Casey and Jared Casey and Bradley Jennings to make a splash there. And then we haven't even talked about Cam Jones, who could very well end up being this team's defensive MVP, and is someone that Chad Wilt spoke effusively about in praise in Tuesday's press conference with the media. If Chad Wilt wanted to, he could have gone for about 5 hours talking about how great Cam Jones was, and understandably so. You're talking about someone who's made a lot of key plays for Indiana over the course of his career with the Hoosiers. Again, you're in week one looking at an Illinois team that's going to run the ball a lot, having those elite athletes, those fast players there in those first two levels can really help Indiana take care of the run game that Illinois brings and can put the Illini in some tough situations. So really interesting to see and hear Wilt's comments about Dasan McCullough. To speak on it a little bit further, Wilt has said that McCullough has shown a willingness to work. He'll embrace whatever role we get him. We're looking to find ways to get him on the field. And at the end of the day, Wilt said they're not trying to overload him, but they're finding the correct packages, the correct times to use him. I mean, if you were in charge of this thing, Matt, and the thing, I know you mentioned McCullough maybe exploring his options in the offseason. We have no idea what's going on behind the
Right. That's
scenes.
just
But
speculation. But
one thing I will say is that Dasan McCullough has a very strong defensive staff right now in charge of his career, right? You start with the head coach and Tom Allen, and you move down across the positional breakdown with Paul Randolph on the defensive line, Casey Teagarden in charge as far as the outside linebackers are concerned, Chad Wilt with decades of experience coaching in the Big Ten and otherwise. There's a sharp group of people right now guiding Dasan McCullough in the right direction. But if you were in charge of this, if you were a Tom Allen or if you were a Chad Wilt, how much say would you give Dasan McCullough in the situation? A special athlete, Bloomington South High School, clearly a physical beast, but also entering a true freshman season.
I would say you let him do his thing. You let Dasan kind of pick and choose here. He's not bigger than the team, right? He's not bigger than the coaches. Obviously you want to make the decision like a combined decision between the staff and the player, right? Because you don't want the player to up upend the
Right.
coach's power, right? And their decision-making process. But you also want to make him as comfortable as possible.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, if there is a percentage, I'd say like make the decision like 60-40 Desans, right? Like, because let him play the position that he wants to play, that he feels most comfortable. Because again, comfort is a huge deal when it comes to a football team, right? Like, if you feel comfortable in your position, you're more likely to make better plays. You're more likely to make the right play and not make mistakes. When you start playing somebody out of position and start throwing new things at them,
Mhm.
it's more likely that they're going to make mistakes than not. So I would say, especially since he's a true freshman, he's probably going to feel some nerves for the first time in his life, right? Because
Of
he goes
course.
from playing maybe at these like high level recruiting camps, right, the highest level of football that he's played, to now playing in the big time in the Big Ten in
Well, it's going to
high
be, I mean,
pressure
it's going to
situations.
be 50,000 people at Memorial Stadium week one. It is. The
Right.
opening night always
Yeah.
draws a crowd, and that's what it's going to be.
Exactly. So I'm looking forward to see what we can get from him. Again, I just really hope the staff kind of takes into consideration, hey, happiness, fit, what he wants to play. Like, let him do what he thinks he can do, and let's just see how it goes. He's that much of like a game changing recruit. If he can stay and you can get him to be comfortable, in 2 or 3 years, he might be the face of Indiana football. So, let him do his thing.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing the developments there. The last piece here, and Dasan McCullough is going to be part of this, and Indiana's depth is going to be part of this. It was very evident that Tom Allen and Chad Wilt on the defensive side of the ball are particular about getting Indiana some more takeaways this upcoming season on the defensive
Yeah.
side of the ball. It was a point of emphasis. It has been a point of emphasis in sessions with the press throughout the entirety of camp. Tom Allen even called it an absolute obsession that Indiana has with taking the football away this upcoming year. Now, Matt, I know there's some fortune as it relates to taking the ball away. Okay, how does the ball bounce after you knock it out? Hey, if a quarterback throws a ball that you tip, does it end up in the hands of your players, not the other team's players, or on the dirt? What are some of the things you're looking for Indiana to do differently this year in order to get more than the, I think it was 9 takeaways they had all season last year?
I mean, I think last year's problem was that the offensive or sorry, defensive line didn't put enough pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And so they were just allowed to kind of sit back there and wait for routes to get open. I remember during the 2020 season, we actually had a pretty decent defensive line,
Yeah.
enough that they got like pressures on the quarterback that caused them to make bad decisions. Also, health was an issue last year
Yeah,
as well.
just a little, right? Just a little.
Staying healthy, pressuring the quarterback a bit more than we did last year, and by a bit more I mean a lot more than we did last year, and just getting these guys back into positions where they can succeed. That's the most important thing to me, because if you can get Tywone Mullen back and clicking, he's going to get you a few turnovers. If you get somebody like J.H. Trevis bearing down on the quarterback, somebody like Cam Jones might get interception or two, right? Just bad pressure creates bad decisions. We didn't have enough pressure last year. Getting more pressure this year is key.
Yeah, it really is. And Indiana last year ended up, it was 5 interceptions and 4 fumble recoveries. Just not nearly enough here. Both numbers close to the bottom of college football. Again, a year after Indiana, really a year after Indiana had back-to-back seasons where they did such a great job of taking the
Yes.
ball away from their opponents. And I totally agree with what you're saying about the pass rush there. That seems to be the initial foundation for any team that takes the ball away a lot.
I I want to point out this. I would be less I would be less of a believer, right? I would have less belief in the defense if they didn't have 2 fantastic years in a row. If they only had the 1 year and then they had last year happen, I might be like, is it really a thing? But they had the 2 years of really good turnovers and takeaways. So I really believe in the defense to bounce back. I think last year was just so bad for every single facet of the team. It was just so unlucky, honestly. Um, and we had a bad coaching staff. You have bad injuries happen. It's just bad all around. So hopefully this year we get some good luck to kind of outweigh the bad luck that was last year.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to not only seeing the defense take the football away this upcoming year, I'm looking forward to seeing Indiana's defense score a touchdown or two as early as that first game. It's
That
been
would
a
be nice.
while. I believe Indiana's last defensive touchdown came in the bowl game against Tennessee a while
Oh,
back. Uh,
wow.
so so Indiana has some work to do, even in the amazing 2020 season. And right now, I'm thinking of this off the top of my head. I don't believe Indiana had a defensive touchdown as great as that 2020 season was. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'll correct that here before our podcast episode ends. But again, it is great to hear that the takeaways piece of takeaways, tackling, and effort, the motto that Tom Allen's brought in on the defensive side of the ball really from the start, takeaways piece, still very much a key foundation of this. And I very much echo your comments as far as the defensive line really starting and getting those sack strips, getting the pressure in the face of the quarterback. That to my common sense eye really does result in more takeaways than a lot of other things you can do on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to seeing that playing out. We'll wrap up with a couple high level things here as we talk more football. Again, a little over 2 weeks until the season opener, but let's take a quick pause here for our social media shout out. And what wonderful news it was to hear DJ White. First of all, just hearing from him in the first place, one of the most decorated players in an IU basketball uniform, one of the most well liked players to ever wear the IU men's basketball uniform. DJ White announced his retirement from basketball earlier this week. White, who is DJ underscore White 3 on Twitter and Wayne JR underscore 3 on Instagram, sent out a release saying, it's been a ride. It's been a good run. He talked about his roots from growing up as a youngster through his different stops as a professional basketball player. White near the top of many of the top scoring players at Indiana University, top rebounding players at Indiana University, really fought through a lot of craziness and conflict during his time as an IU men's basketball player, 2 coaching changes. And
True.
after all that, still one of the most special players to ever wear the Indiana men's basketball uniform. White was the last Big Ten men's basketball player of the year for Indiana back in 2008, even though players like Yogi Ferrell and Victor Oladipo and Cody Zeller have come through the school.
Yogi Ferrell
Trace
wasn't Big
Jackson,
Ten.
he was not. No, I believe Denzel Valentine won it that year, or one of those years, or Trey Burke. No, that wouldn't have been Trey. I think it was Denzel Valentine.
Denzel Valentine sounds right.
I'll double check that too. We're just talking out of our backsides here, but anyway, DJ White retires from basketball. Again, I would love to see. Mike Woodson's talked about reconnecting the past and the present with this men's basketball program. And I think immediately a lot of people say, all right, let's make sure that the current Hoosiers reunite with players from the 70s or the 80s and the Bob Knight era and things like that. But it has gone long overlooked that Indiana had a number of successful players in the 2000s through the 2010s. And you don't have to remind me how long ago that already is. So, getting players like DJ White, whether it's on a video call or getting them into Simon Scott Assembly Hall or Cook Hall to help guide this team in the right direction, I think would be very valuable endeavor for Mike Woodson here in the years to come. Matt, DJ White retiring. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, but clearly one of the more revered players in IU basketball history.
Yes, G White's one of the goats for IU basketball, and he goes under the radar. He's not very highly regarded.
He really does.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. You talk about the guys in the 70s or the 80s, the Knight era. He's in this weird spot where he was like Kelvin Sampson guy.
My end of Mike Davis into Kelvin
I had Mike
Sampson. Yeah.
Davis and the Kelvin Sampson, and then Mike or Dan Dockich.
It's just yeah.
Uh, playing off the top of my head, but I'm sure he had some great times overseas. So.
Yeah, number of stops globally, but I just want to emphasize, right, that last season at Indiana, 17 and a half points per game, 10.3 rebounds, on his way to winning Big Ten Player of the Year. His last pro stop was in South Korea, with a team in Daegu. So DJ White announced his retirement. Looking forward to seeing him interact with this IU men's basketball program going forward. Again, one of the bests. Quick shout out of our social media as far as Indiana HQ is concerned and the Hoosier Sound is concerned. You can follow us at Indiana HQ or at the Hoosier Sound on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Make sure you like our stuff, subscribe to our stuff, share it if you're so inclined. Matt, on Instagram, we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
Exactly. You can find us there. We'll have all sorts of on-site footage from Memorial Stadium and Assembly Hall, among other places across the NCAA footprint here this upcoming year. Make sure you stay tuned for that. Matt, how about this development over the first couple weeks of training camp? All right, make sure you get all your good luck charms, knock on wood, etc., etc. Tom Allen pointed out that so far, Indiana has been pretty healthy to this point in training camp. Pretty healthy. I don't want to say it any louder, but you talked about how important avoiding injury is. You're seeing these kinds of bumps and bruises, if not even worse, in NFL training camps, and you're seeing it in college training camps too. Matt, Indiana's avoided it, and look, Illinois is coming to town. You want to be as healthy as you can be going into that season opener.
True. I just want to say, I hate when people talk about health. You're just jinxing it. You're just jinxing it. So yeah. I'm glad there hasn't been a ton of bad news coming out of training camp. There we go. That's how we're gonna word it.
Or you're just gonna put it that way and move on, right? All right. Yeah. So as we walk down here, Matt, a couple weeks to go until a season opener. If you're paying attention to one of the storylines that we've talked about here throughout this podcast, whether it's Jaylin Lucas stepping up or Donovan Mccully transitioning or the defense's takeaway mindset or Dasan McCullough, what's the one development that you're really going to be paying attention to over these next 2 weeks going into that first matchup against the Illini?
How the offensive line kind of ends up being / doing / growing into all the above, right? How is the offensive line? Is the offensive line going to be able to give Connor Bazelak 5 seconds of breathing room? Not even 5. You can't give him 3.5 seconds to think, right? If you give him 3.5 seconds to think, great. All right, we're all happy, fine and dandy. We can score some points. Last year, it felt like literally they were like the bull masters and they were running the bulls with the red flags, and they just kind of just sat there and
the ole, right? Ole,
and then boom, they just run past them, and they were in the backfield within half a second into the snap. So if we can give our offensive some time, and the offensive line decides to produce this year and actually have a brain, that would be nice, because for multiple reasons. One, because that would prove me wrong and that we would have a good season. And two, that would mean that somebody doesn't get fired at the end of the year, because I feel like we could be looking down a road, if the offensive line is the problem again for the second year in a row, that somebody is going to have to bite the bullet. And so that somebody might be your offensive line coach. So yeah.
Well, hey, I do not, I don't want that to happen.
Nobody wants that to happen.
You'll notice we haven't heard too many comments that we've talked about the offensive line to this point. on this podcast, it's because that Darren Hiller is going to speak to the media on Thursday. So, you know, we're a little bit of a dead spot here, you know, just ahead of Darren Hiller's comments to the media, and we'll get a good status update on where the offensive line is as far as that's concerned. But I like your comment about the O-line. Luke Haggard is getting a lot of love from draft prognosticators and the analytics folks. So we'll see what exactly Luke Haggard can do to help this offense going into next year. As far as I'm concerned, Matt, the conversation for me is all about Indiana's running backs and receivers on offense. I love hearing about Jaylin Lucas. I love hearing about Donovan McCully. You're talking about some really intriguing skill sets for players that can make a really big difference to this offense. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that play out. Indiana needed to change as much as they could change from last season's version of its offense, and having a true freshman come in like Lucas and having a quarterback move to wide receiver like McCully, where he's going to play alongside his high school teammate Omar Cooper. That's exactly the kind of stuff I'm looking forward to watching here as Indiana practice continues leading into that first game on September 2nd. Matt, as we wind down here on this Wednesday night, whether it's related to DJ White or football or anything else going on this planet, any final thoughts on your end here as we head into the end of August coming up here? Wow.
Where's the time gone? Where's the time gone? Yeah, I'm sitting here. I miss you guys a lot. I miss coming on the podcast. It's been a couple weeks. I just really hope that IU as a team can find some sort of, not lucky rhythm, but if they can find some sort of continuity together, this could be really good, a really good season. It could be like a bit of a growth season with throw in a little bit of some spicy changeup winning flair, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But if anything, this is a bit of a year where IU will grow into itself as a team, and hopefully next year you're looking at a special year from this team. So I'm not going in thinking we're making a bowl game. I saw a lot of people on Twitter talking about us going 4-8 or 3-9 or whatever. I think that's probably right around where IU will end up in what is going to be a gauntlet of a Big Ten. But I wouldn't be opposed to a nice surprise.
Yeah. Hey, luck is a thing. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to hopefully a lucky season for my unit, and that's what I'm
There's nothing wrong with that. Good teams a lot of times are good because they are getting the bounces as far as that's concerned. And of course, the one thing I can tell you, and this is what I'm going to wrap up with, Indiana is doing all the right things right now from a football standpoint. The players are bought into things. The coaches, have put last year in the rearview mirror. Again, the coaches that remain over from that staff in 2021. Indiana's chemistry looks to be at a high level. Okay, everyone seems to be in a good mood, from the seniors down to the incoming freshmen and to the transfers. Tuttle and Bazelak are in a quarterback competition, absolutely. But you know what? No one is really taking it the wrong way right now when you hear the comments they're making. And hey, the storylines we talk about, they're real, they're happening. It's been a couple of weeks. And it's funny, I asked the same storyline question to those of you on social media who do follow us on the Hoosier Sound. And right now, the majority of you, I should say 45% of you, think Donovan Mccully switch to wide receiver is the storyline that interests you the most. Of course, we got in a couple of write-in votes here. Nick Lalonde and Jay Alt 75 say the QB battle as well as the offensive line. Matt, you touched on the offensive line there. That's what they believe. But if Indiana had to do just one thing in June, July, into August, say the right stuff, do the right stuff, and hey, as Tom Allen pointed out, they've avoided some rough injuries as well. By the way, I did confirm that Indiana did not have a defensive touchdown in 2020, and they did not have a defensive touchdown in 2021. So the last one was the pick six by Jamar Johnson off of Jarrett Garantano, I believe, against Tennessee in the bowl game back then. Cam Jones and Raekwon Jones also did take one to the house in 2019. Indiana had a special teams touchdown in 21. That was the DJ Matthews punt return. They had an almost pick six against Penn State last season in Happy Valley. But again, no defensive scores for IU since 2019. I'm saying to get one in week one. Book it. That about wraps it up for our 259 show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love. Go Hoosiers.